He reads.
She writes.
And we love stories.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the He Reads, She Writes podcast. We are here to talk about our love of stories and all aspects of them. And in today's episode, we are specifically talking about main character versus protagonist versus hero. What are the differences between these roles? Can a character fulfill all three?
Mm-hmm.
Are they different?
Yes.
Let's find out.
We have to credit Brandon Sanderson and the crew of the Writing Excuses podcast, specifically season 13, episode 1, where they're talking about this. And this, if you're like, what's the difference between these three things? This idea was at first where I first came when this idea was first presented to me. It was in the context of writing a story rather than observing or reading a story or that kind of thing. So here's just a quick breakdown. The main character is the POV character, is the person whose point of view we are witnessing the story. They're the eyes of the reader, or the eyes of the camera, or they're the one kind of with the POV of the story. The protagonist is the one making the actions to forward the plot. They are the one acting and doing the thing. And the hero gets to do the cool stuff. The hero, they do the fun stuff of, like, saving the princess, slaying the dragon. They have typically the hero's journey arc. They kind of have a more of a rags to riches, rise to have like a noble characteristics and that kind of thing. They fit the more traditional hero, because not every main character whose eyes we're seeing the story through is a hero.
It's true.
Not every main character whose eyes we're seeing the story through is doing a lot to further the plot, so they're not really protagging. They are more of the side character sometimes. So it depends on the story. So these roles can be split up among different characters in your stories. So let's talk about it. So I've kind of broke down a little bit already. So let's take them one at a time to dive in a little bit deeper. You want to start us off?
Yeah. So we're going to start with the main character. Like she said, the main character is the point of view character. If you're reading a book that's written in first person, which is very popular as a writing style these days, you have multiple point of view characters, but like you could break it down like this chapter. This is the main character because we're seeing their vision of what's happening.
Yes,
we're seeing the story through their eyes, their perspective. There could be cases where this is a narrator who's telling you, hey, this is something that happened in my past, and I'm going to tell you the story about my past.
In cases where it's like in Lord of the Rings, the narrator is kind of removed from the story, so that's the kind of the POV character for a little bit in certain parts, but then it also, because it's a third person narrator, we kind of pop in and out of people's perspectives too, so it changes like in that story. And then I think of like in Brandon Sanderson's writing in Mistborn, there's a little bit of hopping between chapters. Sometimes we're with Vin, sometimes we're with other characters, and we're changing.
Kelsier
especially, yes, they're popping in between this group of characters into whose perspective we're seeing things through. So you hop around main characters. And then we also have stories where the person whose view we're seeing it through is like the antagonist. I think of what comes to mind most prominently is like in Infinity War, we're seeing through Thanos' point of view. It's his perspective that we're seeing all the heroes and everything. But also like in other things, I think of like the Joker comics. It's Batman stories from Joker's perspective, which is a whole other barrel of monkeys.
Or I think the most popular example would be Breaking Bad, the TV series, where
yes.
You see like the whole story is told from the point of view of the villain. the idea behind it is like, what if a normal person like has something terrible happen to them and becomes a villain? But that happens pretty quickly into the series. You don't get into the sort of things that he decides to do without being a little bit evil.
It's very, yeah, and with Breaking Bad, it's an interesting thing to have this character be the bad guy and to just continue making the wrong choice.
Yeah.
Very confidently so. Just continue to, nope, I'm just going to keep heading down this path and down and down and down and down,
Yeah.
So that's, so it can be that. It can also be a bystander just observing it all. I think of, this is typical in older books. I think of like Wuthering Heights. It's kind of the one that popped into my brain first. And that Wuthering Heights, the person whose perspective we're seeing through is none of the main characters. He's just a guy literally writing it down. And so I don't know if you could argue he's the main character, but it's an example. But and then there's other stories where it's like the main character is this not doing a lot of the action. They're just there, going along for the journey, which is really interesting.
So we have some examples of main characters.
Yes, other than the ones I've already brought
Yeah.
up. Some examples, we have Frodo in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
In the movies, they pivot to have Aragorn be the main character for quite a bit as well.
You talked about Thanos already.
Yes, Thanos.
Thanos is going on the hero's journey in Infinity War specifically, which is a really interesting decision on how to handle that. Like the hero's journey of the villain.
Yeah.
The villain's journey, I suppose.
Yes. I mean, that's if you think about it too much, every hero's journey begins as the villain's hero's journey ends. So he's peaked. The villain has peaked and he's at his highest state, and he is now, completed his arc, and now here comes the hero to ruin all of his plans.
Yeah. Rand al'Thor in The Wheel of Time. My favorite story, my favorite book series. Maybe not my favorite story, but my favorite series is certainly the main character. I mean, the first book is told almost entirely through his perspective. There are some other point of view characters in it, but we see most of the story through his eyes.
Yeah, in the first part.
Yeah, especially in like the first half of the book.
Yeah.
It's not until like the cast gets split up that you start to get some other perspectives coming in, and that's just because, well, we need to find out what happened with our friends here.
Yeah, well, they're spread when they are they're no longer the same location.
Yeah.
And they have Hercule Poirot in Agatha Christie's series with him. There are some exceptions where it'll start off with another character, but he's the main character, and we're seeing it through his perspective of him solving the crime, which is classic. I love those. I love those books so much. And then this was fun. Woody in Toy Story is the POV character. We're seeing all of the movies so far have been through Woody's perspective. The stakes are his stakes.
Yeah.
If you change to another character, there's no stakes involved anymore. Like his is always like, so he's the POV character, which is really interesting because as we go on to the protagonist and hero, Woody may not be the protagonist or the hero.
Yeah, I think a really good like part of the movie that really demonstrates this is the montage where it's kind of like the middle of the movie and Woody's seeing all of the cowboy stuff get replaced by space stuff and by Buzz Lightyear
is replacing him
toys.
Yeah,
and it's just like, oh man, he's looking around like, what's going on? I thought I was supposed to be the star of the show here. I mean, and we continue to see the movie through his eyes, but he's been replaced, at least in Andy's heart.
Yeah, and it's a completely different movie if that scene is done from Buzz's perspective.
And Buzz's perspective is still delusional at that point.
Well, that's true.
Doesn't realize that he's a toy.
If from Mr. Potato Head's, if it was from Mr. Potato Head's perspective, he's like, yes, Woody is now one of us. Like he's like, he got what's coming to him. Stuck up.
Finally.
Stuck up cowboy.
That was a terrible Mr. Potato Head.
That was a terrible Mr. Potato
Head. I apologize, Internet.
It's all right. It's good. All right. So our second consideration here is the protagonist. And I like that in writing excuses, if you follow, they typically have changed protagonist into a verb. They need to protag. They need to do the protagging of the story. And writers, if you're struggling with your character and struggling with, if maybe you get feedback that like I'm just not really identifying with this character, they're kind of boring, it may be that you're letting things happen to them, but they aren't taking action. The protagonist is the plot mover. They're the ones who see things as the way they are and say, no, I'm going to change it in some way. It can be as little as, I'm going to go talk to that cute boy over there or whatever, but they're going to change the status quo. They are going to take action instead of just constantly reacting. A reacting main character is not a protagonist. That's really important. And this also is what, when you watch a movie or you read a book or a show or something, you're like, why didn't that work? Like, oh, that fell flat. This might be why. So where it's like, oh, lots happening, but I just don't care.
Yeah.
It might be you don't have a protagonist.
I think that's a valid criticism of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, because like Falcon is supposed to be the protagonist, presumably, right? He's in more of that position than Bucky is. But he kind of lets the story happen to him, especially early in the series. Now, full disclosure, I enjoyed that series a lot. I did not. For what it was.
Did not enjoy.
And she hated it. I don't know if hated is the right word.
No, hated is the right word. So in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, like, Sam is supposed to be doing things, and he doesn't.
Yeah, not until the very end of the story.
The last episode, he like, finally does something, and it's like, oh my gosh, come on. Like, and then he finally does something, and then spends a good 10 minutes just standing there talking. And I'm like, Sam, you have talked this entire show. I need you to start doing my short soapbox about what's wrong with Cap.
Sorry, I kind of sprung that one on you. I didn't mean to trigger your rant.
Don't even get there. Anyways, that's my gentle rant against that one. We can get spicy later. But so let's get some examples of good protagonists. I think the best example in pop culture is Harry Potter. He consistently does the thing. And when he doesn't, those are the books we're really annoyed with him. And that's usually when he's a whiny teenager. And it's like, but I have angst. And we're like, we don't care. Like, you did the thing when you were 11. Come on, just go do it. So yeah. Harry Potter does a great job of being the POV character and also going and doing the thing. It's great. Thanos in Infinity War also goes and does the thing consistently again and again and again. Every obstacle put in the guy's way, he just keeps charging on forward. You would like me to sacrifice my daughter? All right, I will do it for the cause of the plot. Like, let's do it. Like, heroes, please take note. Loki in the Loki TV series also consistently does this, and he's the POV character, and he's the hero. That's fun too. He doesn't do that in the movies because he's not the protagonist. That's not his job. Yeah. But
my example here is the same one I had in the first, which is Randolph Orr.
He consistently does the thing.
He starts as the main character, and I think you could make an argument that in the earlier books, Moraine is the protagonist because she's the one who is in control of the situation. She's the one who is
the hero's journey that
leading the party. Yes. She's very much like the wise old advisor,
the mentor figure. Yeah.
But in the later books, he is in charge. He is ruling. Big spoilers. Sorry if you haven't read The Wheel of Time. Please go read it. It's awesome. I love it, and I can't say
read it
enough good things about it. But he is driving the plot forward and bending the world to his will in ways that are not seen in most stories.
The wheel turns as the wheel wills. Is that how it goes? Am I close?
The wheel weaves as the wheel wills. Got to get another W word in there.
I know. Yeah. Sorry, I tried. I've only read the first book, so I think I get credit for at least knowing there's a thing. Yeah. Okay, so the last one is the most interesting one, and the one that's kind of fallen by the not fallen by the wayside, but it's not as popular anymore. It's became especially in the early 2000s, in the aughts. We didn't like the word hero for some reason. We got into this phase, and this started in the 80s, but like has bled all the way through the 90s and into the 2000s. I think in the teens and now in the 20s we're kind of like, no, we like good guys. Like, no, actually, we want heroes again.
Yeah, we don't want
We got
anti-heroes.
into the anti-hero thing. We'll have a discussion about that another time. But the hero is the kind of the paragon or the good guy, or they at least end that way. They may not start that way, but they have a positive character arc and they have growth, and they follow the hero's journey. So example would be Buzz in Toy Story. He's the hero of the story. He does all the cool stuff. He has the fullest character arc. He's the one who goes from, I'm a sham, I couldn't fly out the window, from that to, at the end where this is falling with style. He goes full circle. Steve Rogers, that's kind of a given. Sam Gamgee in Lord of the Rings, but also Aragorn. Although he doesn't typically he has a different kind of arc, which is for another video. Keep it in your brain, kids. You should keep a tally of every time I say that's for another video. But Sam and Aragorn both are like, they are kind of going on the hero's journey a little bit, and they are the ones with the positive character arcs, and they are the good guys, and they're the ones who are not just getting the things done, but seeking to do what is best and what is right, and to fix things, not just to do things, but to fix things. I think that's kind of important.
Also driving others to do what needs to be done. We see that
in positive ways.
We see that especially with Sam and Frodo, where Frodo is like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I just want to crawl into a hole and give up. And Sam's like, no, we're finishing this.
And he picks him up.
Yeah.
I can carry you.
I think of another example is Superman. Kind of like almost to the point of
not
like
90s Superman
becoming the trope.
Which is why the 90s Superman happened.
Well,
don't go there.
I'm thinking more in terms of like
classic Superman.
The movies or like cartoons or yeah. But he's just like the quintessential good guy. Like, I will do what is right, and I am powerful enough to do what is right, and no one's going to stop me.
Yeah. Sit down, Batman. He's another kettle of fish. I am full of idioms today. It's a good day. All right, Luke Star Wars.
Luke Star Wars and Skywalker.
Luke Skywalker in Star Wars is also this. Yes, even in the sequel trilogy, he is still the hero, even though he's grumpy about it. Which maybe that's why he's grumpy about it. He's tired of being the hero. Yeah. We never really find out. But anyways, and I would like to say, again, this breakdown of these three areas of the main character, the protagonist, and the hero is just going to be most helpful for writers. And it helps when something is broken, something isn't working. You're like, all right, what are we missing here? What needs to be fixed? That can really help. Oh, now this is the fun part. How does this relate to ensembles? Cast, when you have a group of characters.
Yeah, this was a question that I asked when we were working our outline for this. And
it's a good question.
Yeah, because when you have an ensemble, there's not really a main character usually. There can be characters that you focus on for a little bit of the time, but that kind of gets at what's going on with this, and that's that in an ensemble story, these roles are often not static. You may have one character that is the main character in Act 1 and then takes a little bit of a backseat to another character in Act 2. And then maybe it goes back to the first character in Act 3. Maybe it goes to someone else entirely.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time, these ensembles are groups working together to fulfill these roles so that the story can move forward and make sense.
Yeah. I think the example that I gave that first came to mind is like Ocean's 11. The protagonist, main character, hero is shared between Matt Damon, George Clooney, and Brad Pitt. I don't know what their character names are. I'm sorry. If you do, let me know. But they rotate in who's the POV character, whose lens are we seeing through, who's doing the action of gathering the team, making the plan, etc., and who's the hero, who is doing the cool thing. And it's fun, at the end it's usually Matt, and that's pretty fun because it's baby Matt Damon. It's not old Matt Damon, but so it's fun. And I think, what was our other example?
Mine was Seinfeld.
That's right.
Which, now, sitcoms are a different kind of story, and sometimes there's just not a protagonist because the whole point is that a funny thing
situation is happening to them.
Right? Like maybe sometimes the situation is the protagonist.
Yeah, it is. Sometimes.
But, I gave the example of Seinfeld because you'll have episodes where, like, you're following George through his ridiculous shenanigans, but then Jerry is usually kind of the person that you feel like is the main character in the scene.
It's named after him, so yeah.
Like what? But then there's episodes where, like, there's the one where Elaine goes to a Yankee game and she's wearing an Orioles hat because she's from Baltimore, and there's this big drama because she's sitting in like the box of someone who's like famously a Yankee fan. All this drama. And so, in that situation, like, the main character has shifted to someone else for a time.
For a while, yeah.
And then you also have Kramer coming in and doing all of his ridiculous things that go on.
Which sometimes makes him the antagonist and sometimes makes him the hero. So, depending on the episode. That's fun. I think also we were talking through other ensembles. Guardians of the Galaxy is another example. In the first movie, the POV and protagonist is basically Gamora and Peter Quill.
Mm-hmm.
Between the two of them, they're the ones doing the stuff, and they're the ones whose point of view we are looking through. We're kind of switching back and forth between the two of them, but neither of them are the hero. Groot is the hero.
Yeah.
Because he has the arc from being the, just the goon of Rocket in a prison to sacrificing himself for his friends. Like, that's a huge character arc, and he does consistently. Groot is the one doing the right thing for everyone, even though the others don't quite have it together. And it's his sacrifice at the end that gets them all to work together.
Yeah.
So
I really like that example.
That makes him the hero.
Yeah.
Everyone likes that example because we love Groot.
Mm-hmm. And then if you kind of look at it as like a meta story of like all three movies, it does shift around to the point where, like, at the end, Rocket is now the protagonist,
and Peter and Gamora have left.
Yeah,
like completely. And they have, and they could, because they were able to finish their character arcs. Yeah. Everyone else has been able to finish their character arcs. So, like, Mantis is able to leave, and all of these things because we had the time and the space to spend time with everybody.
Yeah.
And we were talking about that, how in ensembles, sometimes you don't have time ensembles in movies, you don't have time typically to rotate between everybody.
Mm-hmm.
In books and TV shows, you do, which is why, like in Seinfeld, you can rotate through all of the people to have their turns with each one having an episode. Yeah. And in books, you have plenty of time to do that because you've got, thousands and hundreds of thousands of words. You've got, if you're fantasy, you've got even more. You can just keep going, and then it's a sequel, and then there's more books. But in movies, you can't do that because you are very, very limited in time.
You've got 2 hours.
You have 2 hours, so it's to Guardians' credit that they did it so well, and that we can identify very quickly who's the protagonist and who these parts are and who isn't. And it's very clear that they're not, because then we're going to move in now to some bad examples when this doesn't work. And we're going to stick with movies because they're short, they're easy to pick on. If you don't know what we're talking about, you can pretty easily go watch it and be like, that's what they were talking about.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we had two MCU examples. So the first one I'm going to just highlight really quick. I think this is part of why the Marvels doesn't work. Part of what's disjointed about the Marvels is that it was trying to be an ensemble, but it didn't spend enough time with anybody. And so nobody was the main character and nobody was the protagonist. Nobody was the hero because we didn't spend enough time with each one of them. So in a movie, when you have an ensemble, you really need to pick one person to be the protagonist, to be the leader of the group. And they were trying to balance it between the three of them. And you just don't have enough time in a movie to do that. You have to pick. And they didn't, and I think that's why it kind of falls. It just doesn't hit the way it's supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it completely falls apart. I think it's fine. It's a fine movie, but it was supposed to be. It was supposed to hit a lot harder. Especially the ending was supposed to hit a lot harder, and you just kind of left it like, I don't care.
Yeah,
why don't I care?
Yeah.
Why don't I care? Oh, it's because this was unevenly distributed. Because it was too evenly distributed, if that makes sense. It should make sense if you've been following along.
Yeah.
I think another bad example that we talked about from the MCU, sorry MCU.
We really do love
We
you,
really
MCU.
do. We really are fans. I think, but this one we know, Age of Ultron.
Mm-hmm.
Who's the protagonist in Age of Ultron?
It's kind of Ultron.
But he doesn't show up for a while.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean. Like,
yeah,
it doesn't work. Your protagonist can't not be there until, late. Like, that's not what that doesn't work. I think the protagonist is supposed to be Tony. Except the protagonist is the character that does things and pushes the plot forward by making choices and actions. But Tony consistently isn't there for when plot points happen.
Yeah.
So
like you can look at early in the story and say like, okay, well, yeah, but he is the one who created Ultron. And it's like, well, kind of. Like he and Bruce Banner collaborated on it, and then
first of all, it's a collab.
Yeah, and then Jarvis was the one who was there when Ultron kind of
woke up. Like Tony literally left the room.
Yeah.
If Tony hadn't left the room, I don't think Ultron would have happened because he would have seen it attacking Jarvis and stopped it.
Yeah.
But our protagonist left the room, so that makes him not the protagonist. Then it's like, okay, well, who's the main character? Whose POV are we looking through? Well, that's a little difficult too because we hop around so much. Sometimes we're with Wanda and Quicksilver. Wanda and Pietro. If I'm going to use their names, I need to use both names. Wanda and Pietro. Sometimes we're with Ultron. Sometimes we're with Hawkeye. Sometimes we're with Steve. Sometimes we're with Maria Hill. Like we're just all over the place.
And it's like it's kind of trying to be an ensemble cast because like that's like but it's again, the Avengers, but it doesn't really go hard enough on any one character, and none of them really rise up to the level of like moving the plot forward in a way that actually matters.
Yeah, like we were talking like, well, who's the hero then? Because it feels like either Vision or Hawkeye.
Yeah.
Because they do the right thing consistently while they're there. But I argue that Hawkeye is more of the mentor character. However, this is where the problem comes in because he's mentoring everybody.
Yeah.
A mentor is for the main character.
Yeah.
He's for the protagonist, but it's too spread out. It's too equally divided. So those are bad examples. Again, we had really good examples. But there's always going to be ones that don't quite make it. And sometimes those bad examples are really, really helpful to be like, here's a problem. Here's how we fix it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes bad examples are helpful, not to just rag on. Because Age of Ultron is quite easily one of my favorite MCU films.
Yeah,
I have rewatched it the most. And I loved the Marvels. That is one I'm also going to rewatch many, many times with my girls. Like, it's going to be great. I love it. But it's not perfect.
Yeah.
And we can learn from it. And that's easily the best part. So.
Yeah. And I think it comes back to this is like really good information to think about when you're creating a story.
Yes. This is definitely in the weeds of storytelling.
Yeah. And if you're consuming a story and you feel like something's off about it, then like thinking about it through this can kind of help you figure out like what you're not really vibing with.
Yeah, which was what I did when we were watching Falcon and Winter Soldier, and I was just like, anyways, I'll stop. I'm sorry. I won't rag on you when you like. So all that said,
I don't think it's my favorite. I just enjoyed it, and I took a little bit of a stand because not a lot of other people did enjoy it.
He likes to stand up for those that are underrepresented.
Yes.
Stand up for the underdogs.
I will protect those who cannot protect themselves.
You're a good hero. That make me the protagonist, or no, that makes me the antagonist. Oh no. All right, antagonist. So that is probably next time I'll be talking about, because there is this similar idea with antagonists, because there's villains, there's antagonists, and then there's just obstacles, and those are different, and those aren't always people.
Yeah.
Sometimes they are, most often they are, but sometimes they're not. So if you would love to hear us chat and ramble about that, please like and subscribe, and we will see you next time on the He Reads, She Writes podcast, where we talk stories. We get in the weeds because we love to get in the weeds of stories and why they work and why they don't work. And we would love for you to join us.
Yeah.
Please.
So thanks everybody for hanging out, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.